The floor in the Maradona house was dirt. Not packed earth smoothed by years of foot traffic, just dirt. Uneven, dusty in summer, muddy when it rained. The kind of surface that held the cold in winter and radiated heat back in January. It wasn't unusual for Villa Fiorito. Most houses on that street were the same. Brick walls patched with scrap wood, corrugated metal roofs that amplified every rainstorm, gaps where windows should have been, covered with cloth or cardboard when the wind pushed through. Villa Fiorito sat on the southern edge of Buenos Aires, where the city gave way to something less formal. Streets had no pavement. Homes were built incrementally, one wall at a time, as materials and money allowed. Space was negotiable. Privacy didn't exist. The Maradona family, 10 people total, lived in 3 small rooms. Diego Sr. worked at a bone meal factory. He left before dawn and came back after dark, smelling like chemicals and exhaustion. His hands were rough. His shoulders carried a permanent slope from repetitive labor. He didn't talk much when he got home, just washed up at the basin outside, ate if there was food, and sat in silence. Dalma, Diego's mother, managed everything else. She coordinated 8 children across limited space with a precision that looked effortless, but wasn't. Sleeping arrangements shifted depending on who was sick, who needed quiet, who could share without fighting. Meals were planned around what existed, not what anyone wanted. Portions were small and distributed carefully. The younger children ate first, always. Diego was the 5th child, born in 1960. He learned early that asking for more created a problem, not because his mother would refuse, because asking reminded everyone of what wasn't there. It made scarcity visible, and making it visible made it harder to ignore. So he stopped asking. He'd sit at the table, really just a wooden plank balanced on crates, and watch. His mother would divide the food without speaking. A spoonful here, a smaller portion there. She never explained her decisions. The older kids understood. The younger ones learned by watching. One evening, Diego noticed she'd given herself nothing. She stood at the edge of the room, arms crossed, watching them eat. He looked at her plate, empty, then at his own. He wanted to offer it back. The instinct was there. But he didn't, because offering would mean acknowledging what she'd done, and acknowledging it would make her have to explain. Or worse, refuse in front of everyone. So he ate, slowly, quietly. That's when he started learning to read her face, the slight tightness around her eyes when the day had been difficult, the way her shoulders relaxed when a neighbor brought something over, the tone that signaled whether it was safe to ask a question or better to wait. His father was harder to read. He came home too tired for expression. Some nights he'd bring a little extra money. Diego never asked where it came from. The answer wouldn't change anything. The family needed what it needed. If it appeared, you didn't question it. Neighbors helped sometimes. A bag of rice left on the step. A borrowed pot returned with food still inside. Diego's mother never refused. She'd thank them, set whatever it was on the counter, and redistribute it without ceremony. The exchanges were wordless, quick, efficient. Diego learned that accepting help was part of how things worked. That refusal created awkwardness. That gratitude, even when you didn't fully understand why help was offered, kept the system moving. He became good at sensing when to speak and when to stay quiet. Other kids his age were louder, more demanding. Diego watched instead, noticed patterns, adjusted. When an older boy let him borrow a ball, Diego stayed longer than he wanted to, playing with kids he barely knew, because leaving too soon felt rude. When a shop owner gave him something without asking for payment, Diego smiled and thanked him without questioning why. At night, lying on a shared mat with 2 of his brothers, Diego would hear his parents talking in the next room. Low voices, serious tones. He couldn't make out the words, but he could hear the weight in them. problems being discussed, decisions being made. He never asked what they were talking about. He just learned to trust that whatever decisions were made, they were made for a reason. And his job wasn't to question them. It was to adjust. Before the world ever asked him to carry a city, he had already learned not to ask for anything at all. Football in Villa Fiorito didn't require much. A patch of dirt between houses, a ball made of rags tied with string, or if someone was lucky, a deflated leather one held together with tape. Goals marked by stones or piles of shirts. No referees, no schedules, just kids showing up when they could and playing until the light faded or someone's mother called them home. Diego started young, 5, maybe 6. Too small to keep up with the older boys at first, but persistent enough that they let him stay. The games were fast and physical, no whistles, no rules about contact. If you went down, you got back up. If you couldn't keep the ball, someone else took it. He learned quickly that hesitation meant losing possession, so he stopped waiting. The field was uneven and hard-packed, rocks scattered across the surface, patches of mud when it rained. Most kids played barefoot. Diego had shoes sometimes, worn thin at the soles, passed down from an older brother. When they fell apart, he played without them. The ball moved fast. Unpredictable bounces off the rough ground. You had to read it quickly, adjust in real time. Diego was good at adjusting. One afternoon, an older boy, maybe 13 or 14, challenged him near the edge of the field. Diego dropped his shoulder, shifted his weight, and slipped past before the kid could react. Kept the ball close. Moved through 2 more players. Someone shouted. Someone laughed. He scored. Nothing official. No one keeping track. But people noticed. It wasn't the goal itself. It was how he'd moved. Low to the ground. Balanced. The ball seemed to follow him without effort, like it was tied to his foot by something invisible. After that, the older kids started picking him earlier. Not out of kindness, because having him on your team made winning easier. Football was different from everything else in his life. At home, decisions were made around him. Resources were divided by necessity. He adapted to what was given. But on that dirt field, he moved first. He created space. He decided. No one told him how to play. The game had its own logic, and he understood it instinctively. Dribbling wasn't taught in drills. It was survival. If you couldn't keep the ball under pressure, you didn't play. He got better fast. He learned how to read older, stronger players, how to anticipate, how to move into space that didn't exist yet, but would by the time he got there. Other kids played because it was fun. Diego played because it was the only place where he didn't have to wait for permission. Out there, the ball didn't belong to anyone. But when it was at his feet, it felt like it did. Someone was watching. Francis Cornejo, a scout for a youth team called Los Cebollitas, had been hearing about a kid from Villa Fiorito who played older than he looked. Small, quick, didn't lose the ball. Cornejo showed up one afternoon to watch the street games. He didn't say much, just observed. Then he asked Diego's father if the boy could come train with a proper team. Diego was 8 years old. The first time he showed up to organize training, everything felt different. There were goalposts, real ones, lines marked on the ground, a coach with a whistle, other kids his age wearing matching shirts, structure where there had only been chaos. At first it felt strange. On the street the game moved by instinct. No formations, no instructions. You reacted to what was in front of you. Here, there were drills, patterns, sequences you were supposed to follow. But Diego adapted. He always did. The coach noticed quickly that while Diego was small, he understood the game in ways most kids didn't. He anticipated passes before they happened, moved into space others hadn't seen yet. When the ball came to him, he didn't panic, he just played. The first time they gave him a proper kit, clean, fitted, with a number on the back. He didn't say much, just put it on. But his mother noticed how carefully he folded it after training, how he kept it separate from his other clothes. Training sessions meant traveling outside Villa Fiorito, sometimes by bus, sometimes hitching rides. Diego would leave early in the morning and come back in the afternoon, exhausted but focused. The game was no longer just something that happened between houses. It was becoming something organized, something people paid attention to. At home, he adjusted to what was given. On the street, he controlled the ball. Now he was learning to fit into a system, and the system was starting to notice him. Coaches watched him differently than they watched other kids. Not louder, not with more praise, just longer. They'd pause mid-drill to see what he'd do next. Scouts started showing up to matches who hadn't been there before. Parents from other teams would ask who the small kid was. Diego felt it. The attention wasn't hostile. It wasn't even uncomfortable yet. But it was present. And presence, once it settles, changes how you move. He was no longer just playing. He was being evaluated. Los Cebollitas started winning. A lot. 136 games in a row, by some accounts. Not all officially recorded. Not all against top competition, but the streak was real enough that people started talking. And when people talked about the team, they talked about Diego. He was 10 years old. Matches drew small crowds now. Parents, neighbors, scouts from bigger clubs. They didn't come to watch a team. They came to see the kid who could dribble through older players like they weren't there. Diego felt it during games, the way teammates would look for him when the score was tied, the way the ball came to him more often in the second half when pressure mounted. He didn't mind at first. He liked having the ball, liked creating, liked the clarity that came with deciding what happened next. But it was starting to feel different. After one match, a tight game they won in the final minutes, Diego's coach pulled him aside. Didn't say much, just put a hand on his shoulder and said, "They count on you now." Diego nodded. Didn't fully understand what that meant yet, but he felt the weight in it. At home, things shifted too. His father started asking about training more often, not casually, with focus. How did practice go? What did the coach say? When was the next match? His mother would stand at the doorway sometimes, watching him leave for training, her expression somewhere between pride and worry. One evening, a neighbor stopped by, spoke to his father in the front room while Diego sat nearby. The man mentioned a scout from Argentinos Juniors, said they'd been watching, said Diego had a future if things went well. His father listened without much expression. After the man left, there was silence. Then his father looked at Diego and said, "Don't waste it." No explanation, no encouragement, just the weight of understanding that this wasn't just a game anymore. It was a path, and paths led somewhere, which meant not taking them led somewhere else. Diego felt it most clearly during matches. When teammates passed him the ball in difficult moments, they weren't just giving him possession, they were giving him responsibility. If he succeeded, the team succeeded. If he didn't, it was his fault. He didn't resist it. Resistance would have required questioning something no one had asked him to accept. It had just formed around him, quietly, gradually. At home, he'd learned not to ask. On the street, he'd learned to move first. In the system, he'd learned people were watching. Now he was learning what it felt like when people stopped watching and started expecting. And expectation, once it arrives, doesn't ask permission. It just settles, becomes normal, becomes the air you breathe without noticing it's gotten heavier. Before he turned 11, Diego Maradona had already learned how to carry something that wasn't his to put down. If this story left an impression on you, liking the video is enough. For future episodes, you can subscribe.